And now, to welcome you to the event, please put your hands together for Nick Peacock-Smith, Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Millennium Alliance.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we all? Welcome to Denver. Just a friendly tip for those who aren't from Denver, drink lots of water because the altitude and the air conditioning will get you. Just a heads up. My name is Nick Peacock-Smith. On behalf of the Millennium Alliance, we'd like to welcome you all to the 2017 Transformational CMO Assembly. It's going to be a fantastic couple of days. Thank you for joining us. If you do need anything at all, please come and find one of the Millennium Alliance staff. We're either at the help desk, hovering around, and we all have red lanyards. So we're here to help you for the next 2 days and make sure it's a fantastic assembly. And now it is my honor to introduce our friend and partner, Scott Ferber, the Chairman and CEO of Videology, who's going to lead this afternoon's opening keynote session. Please join me in welcoming Scott.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for reminding me to drink my water. I'm going to bring that up here. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's exciting to be able to kick off the event, and it's an honor to actually be the keynote speaker. My name is Scott Ferber, and I'm the founder and CEO of Videology. We're a leading software provider for converged, addressable advertising and video and TV. I can't think of a better audience to have in front of me today than all of you, CMOs, top leaders, and some of the biggest advertisers in the industry. You're all doing some really exciting things and blazing new trails in advertising. It's a great time to be a marketing leader, but let's be honest, you all do not have an easy job. In many ways, I went the backwards. You know, it's funny, I even practiced this ahead of time, and you can say, I'm just going to go, yep. It's like the Seinfeld episode when they went backwards. Okay, there we go. So, in many ways, your job remains the same as it always has been. You're responsible for driving the bottom line of your company. But in terms of advertising, you are charged with making sure that your media investments are driving maximum results. And it did used to be easier. I used to work for Procter & Gamble, and back then, 25 years ago, we knew exactly how many commercials and GRPs were needed to drive a certain amount of soap or cases of soap off the shelf at the grocery store. Of course, that was before the internet, before YouTube, before Netflix, before Amazon Prime, before fill in the blank. The point is, it was before the massive shift in consumer viewing and fragmentation that is happening in the current media landscape today. I think this chart best summarizes the current state of the situation. This is an analysis that showed consumers today are doing so much at once and consuming so much content that if you looked at all of their activities together, it adds up to a 31-hour day. For the average consumer, 12 hours are spent consuming media and tech every day. People are watching TV while they cook. They're using their iPad while they're watching TV. Even their refrigerators have screens. And our day is going to have to get a lot longer to accommodate this. They're being bombarded by content throughout the day. And what has this done? Well, of course, it makes it more difficult to reach audiences with the same efficiency that we used to do. It's created a scattered tapestry of consumer touch points as we stitch from the one to many media world to the many to one. Instead of a family gathered around a TV, now an individual surrounded by their smartphone, their laptop, their tablet, and a connected TV, all creating unique, addressable opportunities to reach that viewer. What this has done, in addition to making it tremendously complicated for all of us to reach a given audience, is it has created an abundance of consumer data. And of course, where there is data, there is the promise of better targeting and measurement. So it's not surprising then that advertisers have flocked to this data. As the media world became more chaotic and more scattered, more fragmented, data seemed like the answer. And in many ways, it is the answer. Because, of course, until recently, you really only had the option of applying these sophisticated data and measurement strategies in the digital space. So that's where marketers went, to the bottom of the funnel. And of course, we all know what happened then, the rise of the digital giants. Currently, it's estimated, according to Pivotal Research Group, that Google and Facebook in particular, capture 87% of all digital spending outside of China. The same research group said that Google and Facebook is responsible for 99% of the growth in digital spending in 2017, outside of China. Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all have tremendous amounts of data. No question about that. They often have a hand somewhere in the attribution chain. No question about that either. But what is the result of putting so much of our collective ad spending into the bottom of the funnel? Well, despite having so much data and claiming so much attribution, some brands that were spending big and hyper-targeting on Facebook and Google actually saw sales going down. I'm sure many of you saw this, but Mark Pritchard from P&G recently spoke about this. He said that 2 years ago, P&G tried targeting ads for its Febreze air freshener at pet owners and households with large families. Makes sense to me. The brand found that sales stagnated during the effort, but they rose when the campaign on Facebook and elsewhere was expanded last March to include anyone over 18. They went too narrow. They relied too much on end-of-the-funnel targeting and attribution. And that's a common phenomenon, but there is such a thing as too much targeting. And here's why. To date, most marketers are only looking to fully utilize data at the bottom end of the funnel, the digital channels. Down at the bottom, they're very good at targeting and optimizing and looking at how advertising drove true ROI metrics like sales. But a balance is crucial, as P&G found out. Brands need to continually feed the top of the funnel too in order to grow. The problem is that historically, the use of data in TV has been limited. They revert to demos, which do work well for some and worked well for Procter & Gamble 25 years ago, and to proxy metrics like GRPs, which means TV advertising is not ultimately connecting the top to the bottom. This means that there's no true way to measure on your TV spend because you just don't know. So there has been a chasm between what the customer sees on the top of the funnel and what they do at the bottom. The thing is, data needs to run across the entire funnel so that measurement can run across the entire funnel. And now, with advanced television strategies, such as data-enabled television or addressable one-to-one household campaigns, this connection is possible. What I'm talking about is a converged approach to TV and video planning that starts with data. It uses technology to apply this data across all screens, from linear TV to all connected devices like PCs, smartphones, or connected TVs, and then determining what the bottom line ROI is from all of the screens. One screen helps to provide insights about what's happening on the other. It's about convergence of screens. It's about the convergence of measurement. It's about knowing the impact to each of the parts, but also the impact to the whole to drive meaningful results. And this can be hard, but it's possible. I'll give you an example. An online travel advertiser came to us with a problem we'd never been faced with before. They needed to prove a major brand product integration was driving results for TV. So it's not an ad in the 30-second, 15-second part, but a product integration to content itself. We were able to take people who saw the brand integration on TV and match them to those who ultimately booked travel through the site. So we were able to give this brand a cold, hard number. We proved that the program integration generated a $29 in gross bookings per user per dollar spent. That was a 68% lift in bookings compared to those exposed only to a TV ad. Once we were able to do that, this client saw what was possible. They could determine the bottom line impact of each advertising channel, including both linear and digital, then compare them and find the right mix. They could also determine the impact on their brand halo. They were feeding the top of the funnel, but they were measuring meaningful results across the whole funnel and tying them together to determine real ROI. And that's just one example of what crossing the chasm looks like. There are many more use cases depending on the challenges that a brand faces and what objective that brand is trying to solve for. And with that, I would like to open it up to 4 great brands that I'd like to invite up for our panel discussion to understand how they are achieving ROI in the complex media landscape that we find ourselves in today. So please, a warm round of applause and a welcome for Stephen Bouchon SVP Marketing Operations at Disney ABC Television Group. Andres Siefkin, EVP Marketing Communications MasterCard. Beth Brady, Chief Marketing Officer, Principal Financial Group. And David Eisen, Chief Marketing Officer, Welch's. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. Really appreciate you coming up here. We have about 50 minutes. I got a bunch of questions here. I'm going to leave the last 10 for question and answer from the rest of the audience. So feel free to get prepared. I'm just going to start going in this way. The first question I wanted to ask everybody is, Stephen's like, oh my gosh. And I'm going to rotate around. The first question I want to ask everyone, the biggest challenge I have when I was at Procter & Gamble was always trying to explain what I felt the true metric for ROI was, or what was I really as a marketer trying to do. So for a minute, I just want to take your individual perspectives. Forget the company perspective, forget the CEO and the CFO. How do you define ROI from the activities that you do?
Well, from activity, are we on?
I think,
Can you hear me?
I think there's a button maybe?
Now you can. Whoa. Sorry about that. So from my perspective, it goes back to cash. It goes back to money. Now, that's different from our company perspective, because in our company perspective, it's all about ratings, because I'm in television, and that's our currency that we use. But from my perspective, we have to always trace it back to what the company really cares about, and that's money in the bank.
And for you, just so I understand, when you say money in the bank, that's a cash-on-cash return, meaning you invest cash as a marketer, and then you're looking at how much cash you generate on the other side of that equation?
So for example, what we'll do is, the intermediate step for us is to drive ratings, which are then sold through our sales organization to advertisers. But then what I try to do is, if you look at an uplift in ratings, we try to relate that direct to what the revenue is for the company. And then we use that, because that way we can have the real conversation about, look, we're asking for a greater investment, and this is the return that we're going to get from that investment in terms of increased revenue.
So it's not just ratings, it's ratings of a particular show that generates a particular, I'm using the show as a proxy, I hope that's okay, of a particular, because certain shows can sell for more money than other shows. So the investment could differ based on the ratings of the show you're driving.
So again, there's a difference between what I think we should be measuring and what our company does. Because right now we tend to look at first base, a rating is a rating is a rating, when that's not the case. As advertisers, you all know that if you're going to buy something in Modern Family, you're going to pay more than if you're going to buy something in Dancing with the Stars. So what we do when we're trying to do the ultimate modeling, we actually do take it down to what is the CPM for a given show in a given half hour at a given point of time in the year.
Thank you. That was great. Just to add a quick continuation, you made the comment of CEO and CFO. Do they have the same view or a slightly different view from what you just described?
Well, our CFO is all about cash. Our CEO, I'm just talking about television, I think he's really focused more on transformation right now, because everybody knows that the television business is changing. So I think he believes that if the CFO can ensure we're getting the cash in, he can use it to spend to transform the company.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for that. Andres?
Excellent. Thank you so much. And well, to answer that question, I will have to describe the company a little bit. So MasterCard, majority of people know it as a credit card company. We actually don't issue a single credit card. We are a technology company. We are the technology behind all the processing, not only credit cards, but over the last, call it 10 years, we have actually diversified, and we are in every single way of moving money around the world. So when I look at the company, we are a business to consumer company. So ROI for me is demand. Period. Mm-hmm. So demand, meaning if we are working with our business-to-business partners, they actually want to work with us. They want to partner. They want MasterCard to be either their credit card, their ACH, the services that we provide, and the analytics, anything that we actually provide as a company. And from a consumer perspective, is the preference of actually using credit card, MasterCard as the card of choice, or putting it on a card on file and things like that.
Okay, and so I understand there's correct me if I'm wrong, there's two different parts of the business, the consumer side and let's call it the I don't want to call it the vendor side, but the commercial side of it?
No, the reality is we are just a branded house. It's just right. MasterCard. So what we have been doing is we have been acquiring companies over the last years, and so we actually go to market with for either issuers and merchants with a suite of products for all different kind of opportunities to actually move money. But then on the other side, we actually connect with consumers in a very emotional way. So we have our prices platform that has been alive for almost 20 years, and you will see that now the evolution of prices coming up. And so that marrying of a very rational with a very emotional side actually has been very successful for us.
So how do you evaluate, for example, something like the priceless campaign? Is there metrics that you use for that? And how does that differ from, let's say, the acquisition of a new merchant who wants to use MasterCard products and services and technology?
It's a great question, and it goes back to the P&G experience, and I come from P&G as well, and also remember the times when you were just tracking very detailed how you actually drive the sales. And so, for example, for us, we eliminated tracking like awareness or impressions.
Okay.
Everybody knows MasterCard. We are like almost 100% brand awareness. The key point for us at this point is it's more about engagement, about conversations, about tracking how people feel about the brand and experience the brand than coming up with impressions. So let's say the media company used to come to us and say, well, you just generated 600 million impressions from the last campaign. And the answer these days is with our advertising company is that we do not start an advertising campaign or strategy or brainstorming with an ad in mind that is going to go to TV or online video. We started with a mindset that is earned media. So what is actually that going to do for us in earned media? And then, okay, it's actually going to be a good campaign. So it's reversed.
Interesting. For earned media.
It's reversed, and one of the big changes that I made in the company was I actually merged communications with marketing and put digital under communications to get a different perspective on how we actually drive the earned media and integrate it with the advertising. And so far, so good.
And Andres, I'm taking advantage of the opportunity. I hope you don't mind. One more follow-up question. Yeah. Do you evaluate I'm calling it the merchant side. Is that an okay term to use?
Merchant will be all retailers and airlines, hotels.
Right, and I'm just using that as a nice phrase to make it easy. Do you have different metrics for how you evaluate the merchant side of your marketing, given that you said engagement and earned media is on the consumer side?
Yeah. So it really varies, and it depends on the goals and the maturity level of the account. You might actually have metrics around acceptance or registrations, or if you are doing offers, making sure that the sales through and sponsorships, you want to make sure that if you are doing, for example, to give you an example, a whole tour with Carrie Underwood and American Airlines and MasterCard, you want to see what is the attribution to the brand and how people are actually relating the whole sponsorship with both brands. How the message actually coming through as a strong partnership to enhance both brands. So one of the key things, maybe to answer that as well, is we are an ingredient brand. So we don't actually market for ourselves. We believe that, different to our competition, we believe that our brand enhances the value proposition of our partners, and especially because we go with an emotional marketing side that many of our partners, they don't have a permission to do. So we actually enhance the value proposition. So we actually track how our emotional engagement uplifts our partners' ability to connect.
That's a really interesting metric. I hadn't thought about that one before, even though I'm very familiar with the Priceless campaign.
Yeah.
It's a great advertising approach for sure. Beth, how are you? So once again, the same question. How do you define ROI and what you do?
Yeah, well, so I guess there's a lot of us packaged goods people up here because I'm a General Mills, so it was quite easy back then because we had all the transaction data that we could use in our modeling. It's harder in financial services because we don't have access to that. Ultimately, what we look for is profitable top-line growth. I mean, that's really what we're trying to drive. Profitable top-line growth, good margin business. Our ability to actually do those calculations because of how our business operates can be difficult. So what we've done is we've modeled out what things drive loyalty and how do those KPIs get measured. So even though in the old days at General Mills, we would actually be able to model out exactly to profit, right? We can't quite do that where I am now, so we take a couple steps back, and we've understood what really leads to that. So what leads to loyalty? What are the experiences? And then how do we take that data and model that out against our marketing activities?
Is there a particular metric or couple key metrics that you look at in particular from your perspective?
So, you mean from a KPI standpoint?
Yes, KPI, please.
So one of the things we look at is AUM, assets under management.
Right.
And so how is the growth of that going? Because that tends to be a leading edge metric in financial services. We will look at things like quotes, quote quantity that we get. That tends to be a leading edge metric. We will model out, we calculate brand health through Millward Brown. We gather brand health information, and we will model against those metrics of saliency and meaningfulness and differentiation to see which marketing activities are driving those which are indicators of brand health. So unlike a lot of some of the businesses here, our brand principle is still relatively unknown, so we really do drive to get awareness. So to your slides earlier, that that first step, we're not going to get anyone to consider us or transact with us if they don't know us. And so we spend quite a bit of time trying to build awareness, and we measure the effectiveness of all of our activities to drive awareness, because we know that is the first step.
Have you been able to link awareness down to the bottom of the funnel of actual transactions and understood that dynamic? Or I guess you were saying it's hard to get the transaction data you were describing.
Yeah, we can in certain instances. It depends on, we have multiple parts of our business. So we're in insurance.
Right.
We're in retirement plans. So those are sold B2B through advisors and consultants and all sorts of other things. And then asset management, which gets even trickier.
Right.
So the closer we are to the transaction, the easier it is for us to connect all those dots. The further we are from the transaction, if it's going through multiple intermediaries, then we have to model out the what is the path to purchase. We have to understand that, and then we have to look at things that are a little closer to our data sets, because a lot of that happens, and we have no data around the transaction because it's happening through a third party.
Right, that's the big one. Kind of like HBO doesn't really know the exact people who subscribe because the cable companies themselves are the ones who have access to that information, as an example of another industry. David, please, from Welch's.
I'll offer two answers, but first,
David, I think it's just a...
Is that better?
Perfect.
It's been on. Okay. So two answers, but first an apology for that headshot. I'm not sure who the bald, tired-looking guy is up there, but I'll take care of that. So the first answer is kind of, really, it's kind of rough. Moment of self-awareness there. First to Beth's point, I also grew up at General Mills and have continued on in food and CPG. And so the easy kind of quantitative answer is, how much did you spend? How much incremental sales did it generate? And given the profitability of those incremental sales, to what extent does it pay back on that investment? It's increasingly hard, especially in a smaller business environment and in a more fragmented world, to generate a north of $1 ROI, right? For every dollar you spend, you generate more than $1 of incremental profit basis that investment. It's increasingly hard to do that. And so you have to kind of take that quantitative assessment with a grain of salt. The second and more kind of holistic way of looking at it, and it kind of, I think, speaks to some of the things that Andres was referring to, are really more around looking at brand affinity and engagement and loyalty in a more integrated way. So we also have metrics that look at, our overall brand equity scores and, to what extent relative to especially your competitive set through an inherently more qualitative and integrated, mix of factors, are you engaging consumers better or worse than you used to? And you trust, and you have to, and this is kind of the, where the art and the science of ROI come together, that affinity ultimately translates, to sales in ways that you can measure through those other complementary metrics that are more quantitative in nature. So it's really both of them is the short answer. I have to look at, relatively speaking, where I think I'm getting the best bang for a buck in a limited resource environment, but then ultimately, do I think that the suite of collective actions I'm taking are enhancing our competitive position and our engagement with consumers that position us better going forward?
Quick follow-up question. You mentioned it's really hard to get $1 ROI, which, as I understood, $1 of return for $1 of marketing investment. Is that because you're looking at one transactional moment, or are you looking at the net present value of a customer, so to speak? And how do you balance that trade-off?
I mean, I think that the simplest way to do it, I don't know if we can really get to, or at least I don't look really at the NPV of a customer. It's more a matter of, I think it's kind of what Beth was alluding to. If you have a marketing mix model and you spend X dollars, you can actually break down with a partner like a Nielsen or an IRI, how each investment component translated to a measurable sale, and what does the math look like? I think that call it what it is. It's a more competitive environment as you move from a place that has natural efficiencies of scale, at least as it used to be in a larger company, to a smaller one, which is inherently more fragmented, where your ratio of non-working to working dollars and the startup costs of any activity are just harder to overcome with the return. Getting north of that dollar ROI it's just hard to come by.
I'm going to kind of do the comeback, if that makes sense, if that's okay. That way you get everyone gets to rotate around. So David, my understanding, and I'm not a Lexus marketer, but my understanding that luxury car choices for consumers in this country, typically the brand affinity is, Coke and Pepsi too, is somewhere in that 12 to 16 age. And I'm not saying it's exactly that, but it's at a much younger age, let's say, for the luxury car than the ability for the person to pay for it, right? So the idea is that by the time, I'm making this up and I'll use myself as an example, I'm 48 and I have the financial wherewithal to buy a Lexus. If you're trying to convince me to buy an Infiniti, it's almost too late, because I've been aspiring to be a Lexus owner for a long time, and all I'm really looking to do is say, my car died. There's an 8 to 10 day car buying cycle in automotive, so where's the closest place that can give me the best service? Something to that effect, roughly speaking. How do you look at your brand in particular? Where is that, that moment of influence in the same way that I just described Lexus, as to where you need to develop that brand relationship? And I'm not saying that it doesn't mean you can happen later, because you can get moms who all of a sudden say, this is the greatest stuff ever. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how you guys look at that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it varies from brand to brand. And as I think about the range of brands I've worked on over the course of my career, I'd offer you a different answer, probably given the nature of how that brand operates. But I'll speak currently to kind of our master brand of Welch's, because we're essentially one company of a master brand that cascades across multiple platforms and food categories. But the commonality is that by and large, when I say Welch's, and great, most of you probably know what it is. But if I asked you when was the last time you had it, that answer would be much less compelling, at least if you're me. And so what you have in that case is you've got a general affinity, right? It's a well-liked brand. It's one that folks grew up on. I hear this all the time, that they know. And so I'm going to get back to your question here. And so the nostalgia or the memory or the heritage is a really important part of who we are. But ultimately, the driver to influence the sale is very different. That's really more about not modernizing, but recapturing and reconnecting with a relevance that is more true to who that consumer, that purchaser is. More often a mom than anybody else, although as we've gotten sharper, we actually over-index more with dads in certain ethnic components of the population. So the challenge for us is less around connecting early in a life cycle and more around adjusting in a more contemporary way the relevance, the benefits, the why it matters to me today versus the original perception of that brand.
Thank you. Great. Andres, please.
Let me add a couple of things. Great thought. I think that the main thing that is happening right now, especially the last 5 years, is that the person in charge of buying in the household has changed dramatically. And access to the channels and access to how you buy, it's making a lot of changes in actually how you should target people or who should you actually target. So for example, as a company, we usually, as a company, tend to target more like 35 to 65, more affluent, very traditional on payments platforms. But the reality is that you now observe that it's not mom that is actually making the decision, but by the way, if you are on Amazon, your kids might actually have access to your account as well, and everybody's ordering. Or they
I don't know any. I have no idea that that's happening in my house.
yeah. Or look at the bank and the credit cards. Before it was kind of like difficult for you to do like the extensions of the card. These days you just go on the website and you just add 7 names and they ship you the credit card and you just give it to the people that you want, right? Could be your mother-in-law, your cousin, whoever you want. They want you to spend. And so that's one of the key things in terms of how do you actually change the conversation. So for us has been more about really targeting different groups that will be have the potential to spend, and not just the people that are spending right now, and how you actually do it. So you need to start bringing them in, but as a company, philosophically, we actually do not do marketing under 21, and we saw only 21 and above.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, all right, let me just take that for a second. So I used to work for Capital One Financial Corp. They were on the board of MasterCard and all that other stuff, very big supporters of MasterCard. And if you notice recently, especially with like college basketball and things, they are really going after that younger group. Now, historically in credit card marketing, the problem with younger people is they don't have credit history, so you're taking a risk there. That's just interesting that you're saying. Any comment on that?
I think that's the B2B or the B2C strategy varies by either merchant or issuer, but us as a company doing campaigns to affect the purchase, we just do it on 21 and above.
Great. Beth, if you don't mind. I know you're in a very different, I mean, I like this, and I know you have a general background, so feel free to talk about all of it, but your financial one is very different than I would argue some of the others.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tricky thing for us is we need to be convincing multiple audiences of who we are. But I think the question you really have to ask yourself is, what are you in the business of? So, you know, a lot of us would say, well, I'm in the business of life insurance, or I'm in the business of, you know, of Welch's. But we are really taking a different look now, and we're saying, well, actually, we're in the business of, you know, of financial wellness. That's what we're in the business of helping people live a better life, and financial services is a means to an end. And so where we're now saying is the proposition we're putting out there is a broad proposition of we want to help people live a better life. And now we have multiple ways of bringing that to life through our products and through the services and through education and through all sorts of other things, thought leadership, things that we do. So that's what we want to stand for. The other thing that we're dealing with is, as I said earlier, in our business, transaction goes through intermediaries, right? We don't necessarily transact with an end user. But that is being disrupted massively in financial services, because now all of a sudden there are all of these companies starting up, very digitally driven, where you can actually go and buy all that stuff right online. In the old days, you wanted to buy life insurance, it took weeks because you had to do a test, and they had to go through the actuarial review and all of that. Well, now it's being done instantaneously. So as we're continuing to try to build our business with those intermediaries that still do the bulk of it, we recognize that there's this, you know, younger group coming up that is likely to gonna buy financial products differently than their parents. And so we're beginning to build to the Lexus thing. We need to start building our reputation with them, our brand with them now, knowing that they may not transact with us for 10 years. I mean, it may be that long.
And measuring, so that's, there, thank you. Not easy. What I'm about to ask, I cannot be easy. I can't imagine. How do you, is there any way to tie that brand work, just using the example you said, of 10 years earlier to the transaction opportunity 10 years later? Or is that not, it's not a great exact science yet?
I think, you know, I think there's some, I call it loose modeling that you can do to, and we do a lot of, you know, lifetime value work, like what is the lifetime value? But I think 10 years from now, we'll be able to do it as we do a look back. I think that the technology is going to get us there. I think between AI and the transparency of people's transactions, we will down the road have all that gathered in such a way that we can, with, obviously safely be able to say, when did these people first start hearing from us? When did they first start seeing us? And can we begin to track their journey with us over, multiple years? Today, we can't, because if we're looking at someone who's doing it right now, we don't have the 10-year history back.
Right.
That is good enough.
Right.
So that's really the problem we face.
It's interesting, Beth, because I think if you think about that, and if 10 years is the time frame, the data structures that you're putting in place now, which may be cutting edge, may not even exist later on, and it's that migration of data and keeping that data relevant 10 years from now to be able to do that long-term analysis. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, because the data will just continue to accumulate, and at some point in time, somebody's going to say, do we really need all of that? No, we can cut off. Let's just keep the last 5 years.
That's a great point. I've lived that. That's a great point. Did you want to say something, Andres?
I think it's actually a great point, and we see these days more and more people want to connect with brands and companies with purpose, and how important is actually drive the purpose and not just the product. And so, for example, for us, our purpose is connecting people to priceless possibilities. Has been our purpose for almost 20 years. Our mission is to create or have a cashless society, and our vision is to eradicate poverty. So, and how do you actually do it, and how do you drive it through the brand and through emotion? So, for example, your question on how to measure, questions that we ask, is this a brand for you?
Right.
That is critical for us. Is this a brand that actually has so you understand the role this brand actually plays in your life? It's another one. And then making sure that people actually connect or describe if MasterCard, being such a rational product, actually is connected or helping them achieve something else.
Right.
Which you will be surprised how strong actually that comes.
Well, that's coming from the advertising. I connected with that as well. It makes sense. Please, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing. I don't know if you all have seen this in your respective organizations, but with the complexity of the data and the fact that the data as we use it today might not even exist in the same form, even less than 10 years from now, right? And the fact that in many cases, as we've relied upon these different ways of trying to get a read on ROI, and we haven't been satisfied with the overall business result anyway, I've seen a return in my organization really of late to saying, what we've really walked away from too much is leveraging our instincts and gotten away from really trusting ourselves and our collective experience and intuition, and relied too heavily on the numbers. So I think what we're seeking right now, at least, is a balance. Not dismissing the numbers by any stretch, right? But I think there was a time period where the reaction was, well, gosh, the world has changed. We've all got to go digital, but we got to figure out how to measure it. The challenge to every potential digital investment was, well, what's my ROI? And I've seen the pendulum come back to say, yep, we got to get a quantitative read. But what we've kind of lost in the shuffle is take a step back. Does this feel right? Is this really advancing what we're trying to achieve? And we're all here in these jobs for a reason. Let's have an honest conversations with ourselves about what that looks like.
I'm going to change now to, if it's okay, about data, right? I know we've been talking about it, but if it's okay, I'll start with you, Stephen. How are you approaching data? Each of you have different businesses. I find you're fascinating because of the tune-in opportunity. How are you using it? Is it for insights, for activation? Is it for measurement? Is it across everything? Just any comments you can share with us about how you view and use data in your marketing efforts?
So the answer is yes. You can keep going down on the list. So again, I'm going to speak about the television because for the Walt Disney Company as a whole, we have different touch points with our audience. And if any of you have been to the Walt Disney World, you see what we're doing with the Magic Band and how we're actually enhancing the guest experience by understanding where they are, the context that they're in, and providing a stellar service based upon that context. In the television business, what we're doing is, so I'm still in broadcast television. So broadcast television is an ad-supported model meaning that all third-party advertisers that buy ads on our network, they are remunerating us, and that's how we're making our money. So right now, in order to do that, we're selling against something that's really fuzzy, which is called a Nielsen rating. Now, Nielsen's trying to make that rating much better, but it's still fuzzy. It's a panel of people who are supposedly representing the rest of the United States for this domestic market. So what we do is we model against that. So we'll model, for example, when we do our, you can call it attribution, but it's really, heavy media mix modeling. We'll look at all of our investment, whether it be on our own platforms, or whether it be on our the paid media and the different types of paid media. We'll look at what the impact is on a rating. And we have a rolling 5 years of data on what that looks like. So all of our media investment against all of the ratings that we've had, and we're able to identify what the contribution towards a rating point is for a given show at a given point in time. So that's one of the ways we're using data. And then we take that and we bounce it off against CPMs, and we can determine what the first year expected value is of a rating point, or of an increase in media spend to increase a rating point by a fraction, and then what the lifetime value would be over the course of that television show across all the ways that we've monetized it. So that's one way we're using it. Another way is we own inventory, so we have to optimize how we're using that inventory for sales or for promoting our television shows. And so what we're able to do is we're able to compare those two to see when we should be making the trade-off between, should we sell this 30-second spot to an advertiser, or should we use it to promote The Good Doctor, which then has carry-on, halo effects on other parts of our television. So we're using data to allow us to do that. And then within our inventory, if we're going to promote our television shows, which is the best show that we should be promoting in Modern Family to have the greatest impact on our overall schedule. So we're using data across all of that really to optimize our ratings and then to manage our inventory.
Got it. And in the particular, the broadcast network part of the business, the predominant measurement is, at least for today, the Nielsen rating, because that's how the transactions are occurring. Not that that won't change in the future, but that's the consistent one, correct? And on the park side, you were mentioning Walt Disney World, one of my favorite places to go. That's not a plug,
Thank you.
Just true. There you're doing things like what, net present value or customer transactions or profitability?
So in fact, the use of data within the Walt Disney Company started in our theme parks around yield management, making sure we didn't have any hotel rooms open. And it's just grown from there. And what we try to do is we try to optimize the experience of the guests at the same time optimizing the revenue that we make. And I mean, we have a lot of first-person data that we don't share amongst our siloed companies, and some that we do share. Well, because the parks, they have a privileged relationship with a guest, and they don't want ESPN, for example, taking that data and just bombarding them with ESPN advertising to get people to watch ESPN. Now, there are synergistic plays that we do use, and we have one DMP across the enterprise that we do leverage, but there are very strict rules as to how we use each other's data.
Okay. Thank you. Andres?
Two different ways. One is from a B2B perspective. So as you can imagine, we sit on a gigantic amount of data.
Yeah.
And what we have been doing is getting more sophisticated. So we have been acquiring companies like Applied Predictive Technologies, APT, that works with a lot of the Fortune 500, or we just acquired Brightterion, which is an artificial intelligence company, and many other startups. And what we are doing now is getting really sophisticated, working with our partners back to being an ingredient brand and helping them understand how to connect better with their customers, or where to open the different stores, or how to grow their margins or grow their portfolios. So one of the other things then, more from our marketing with them, is really understanding, for example, what happens when we expose, let's say, 3 million people with a priceless offering. For example, could be you are sending an email, and you have the chance to go to this priceless event. Just reply first, pretty much first in, first eligible. And the growth that we see by doing that, the growth that we see if you sell it, the growth that you see by different growth groups, and how do you track that over time with the different credit cards. The other thing is product development. So what kind of products do we actually need to launch based on the analytics that we have, and where we see actually people buying or leveraging the products that we have. And so far, there is pretty much endless. There are a lot of things going on.
I know that you get tremendous amount of I came from, just like I said, an issuing bank at one point, so I know there's a lot of transactional data. Do you care about what types of transactions people do, or are you really looking for just total transaction volume?
No. We really care about what kind of transactions. So especially we market, when it comes to marketing, we go into 9 passion points. So we did a lot of analytics, understanding what are the key passion points where people actually spend the most money. And we actually segmented in 9 passion points.
Right.
And then, for example, culinary might be one. Culinary is very high with millennials. No, that's public information. And then how do you actually develop programs to target them based on the data that we have, and in collaboration with either the merchant or the issuer, and what kind of either celebrities or programs that we need to overlay, or for example, do we actually need to partner with Google or anybody else to overlay some data to actually get to the deep detail that is needed. So it's not just about our data. Partnering and co-creating is big part of our job.
Okay, thank you. Beth, you have an interesting portfolio of products.
Yeah.
How do you use data across the landscape?
So we use data like everyone else in multiple ways. I mean, we certainly use data to help us better understand our customers, because we are actually moving from a model of being more product-centric to becoming more customer-centric. That may sound like just an easy shift, but it really is not. And it's been a journey. We're still on it. But I mean, what it means as you think about it is companies organize and build up and do everything around a product. And so what we're saying is, no, we want to build it around the customer, and so we don't care if insurance sits over here and IRAs sit over here and mutual funds sit over here. If the customer's buying them, they should all have that same experience. So we're using data to help understand what that customer wants with regard to this kind of purpose-driven approach that we're taking around their financial health. So we're using it on that front. And that is then helping us drive better experiences. It's helping us figure out what are pain points. It's helping us figure out, what are the things that people want from us. I mean, we could bring out new products every day and put tons of new benefits on it. And, disability insurance, the problem is people don't want to think about being disabled. So has nothing to do with the features on it. It has everything to do with how you position it. So we're using data to truly, truly deeply understand our customers. We're also using data to figure out what are the inefficiencies in our processes that we can go in and fix with, instead of having people sending them to the call center, is there a digital option with a bot that we can just automate the whole thing? Right. So we're using it to really dissect our business processes, to really understand, where we can create an improved experience. And then I'd say the final way is, what we talk about here, and, a lot of what David was talking about was we're using data to understand what are the activities that we're doing that are driving towards more profitable volume for us. Like, what are those things that matter the most, and how do we in real time make shifts? So we're looking at data every day on the work that we have out there, and as we're seeing, well, it looks like paid search is really a great way for us to connect on this particular experience. Let's shift money over there, and we're not getting as much on our banner ads, so let's shift money away. And we're doing that in real time.
Great. Stephen, you picked up your mic all of a sudden. You had a dying comment you wanted to make? I was just going to go to David, but I was just overreading the situation.
Yeah, no, I have a comment. Beth, I'll follow up with Beth afterwards.
Okay, great. David, thank you.
I'll just build on the last portion of Beth's response to. I'll say one of the things we're trying to do more with data, which is less to analyze what happened and more to focus on, it's a very basic comment, on what do you do about it? Because I think the trap can be, right, especially if you're in certain categories which are fundamentally challenged, and we have our share of those, and that there are category declines, and you can analyze those. You can spend all kinds of time doing that, right? Shelf-stable multi-serve juice, category is down 3%. We lost 3% last month. And you can identify where that occurred. Distribution loss here, velocity loss there. Okay, great. But if fundamentally that doesn't connect to an action that you can take differently to move the dial, then why are you spending your time analyzing that? You're much better off saying, okay, well, how has the consumer mindset shifted such that you can connect with them through communications or product strategies that deliver a benefit in a new way. If you're marketing digitally and you know that this social post drove that kind of engagement and that social post drove 20% less engagement, well, okay, what do you learn about that? And how does that impact the way you drive the conversation forward and innovate, even from a product or packaging standpoint differently? That's really where it's actionable and can help you move forward the right way.
I wanted to add one more thing, building off of that. One of the things that I noticed when I came on to In Principle was we were doing surveys, hundreds of surveys every year, just surveying, asking questions. But no one had gone back, and this is one of the things that we are now doing, and saying, well, we're asking this question, does this question even matter? Do people even care? We're asking people, did it take too long for us to get back to you on this quote? And people will automatically, if you ask them, they'll give you an opinion, and most times it takes too long. And so then we put a ton of people on making the quote time frame slower, but guess what? It doesn't matter. So what we're trying to do is figure out what are those things that matter so that we can then turn around and only collect and analyze that information and not, obviously you want the experience to be right on everything, but we got to focus on the things that matter, and that's the other place that we're really applying, analytic thinking and data.
How do you, I want to come here to you, Andres, how do you determine what matters in that example of waiting for the amount of time it takes to get a quote back? Do you do like A/B split testing? You give people some people get like a quick quote response, some people get a long, and then you look at the impact and say, oh, there's no difference, so who cares?
Well, the modeling we're doing, for example, in that instance is we've said, okay, well, what is it that we're trying to achieve? We know we're trying to achieve loyalty. Okay, what's the KPI around loyalty? We're going to choose retention, right? So then we're saying, all right, those, we can look at the people that have stayed with us and those that have left us. And then we can start to say, well, those that have left us, where are the connections to, what is the connecting data versus those that have stayed with us? Then that leads us to the path of saying, this is what's important to them. What's important to them is quick resolution digitally on a problem.
Right.
It's not about how long a quote took. And so then we go and say, now we need to start understanding, and really those are the questions we need to ask, is how did we do on quick resolution? And I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, right. This is
and then we can start to say, well, we have a problem in this instance here where we're not resolving things quick enough. So let's put a team of people against solving that problem. So it's really about saying, using information and data to tell us where we should focus our efforts, because we'll be swirling all day long if we don't have some focus.
Great. Andres.
Yeah, the key thing for me, especially this year, has been about simplification. So if you look at the scorecard that we used to have, was a massive scorecard with all kind of brand health numbers and just a lot of things. And the reality is that, considering that we have a very strong stature, being like people, you ask everyone, MasterCard, yes, it's a great brand, yes. Awareness is almost 100%, but then the key thing is strength, and strength defined, you go deeper and deeper and deeper when you're actually looking at what really differentiates you from competition. And the reality, you are arriving 2-3 key things where that all your advertising and marketing strategy need to be working around. So I'm actually looking at 3 things. I cannot say what those 3 things are, because there are 3 things. And then what that helps us to do is change a lot of the contracts that we had, especially with media agencies and with sponsorship companies. So for example, MasterCard sponsors MLB, sponsors PGA, and a lot of things. If you watch the World Series, just concluded, we had way less banners and logos in the outfield and things like that. We don't need that. We have 97% or 98% brand awareness. Who cares about the logo? But we had way more activity around emotion and about connection. So we stopped the game on the All-Star game, and we stopped it also on Game 4 on the 15th inning for 3 minutes to do a Stand Up to Cancer placard moment. We actually changed a lot of the logos. We changed that for experiences. So, for example, getting almost 3,000 children into the game and meeting the players before the games. We changed throughout the year logos in all the stadiums for a lot of experiences where you actually surprise people and send them to stadiums and things like that. So driving a brand that is more, and of course it applies to us because we are high on brand awareness, but it's more about the purpose, more about the emotion, and less about the logos and the awareness. It really pays out. And then at the end of the day, those 2-3 things that you want to really change, those need to drive your entire strategy.
Right. Wow, that's really fascinating. Less is more in a certain way.
Way less is more.
So we only have 5 minutes left. I apologize for not moderating appropriately, leaving 10 minutes. But would anyone like to ask questions? I have a lot more I could ask, but would anyone like to ask questions? There we go. Nick is just going to grab a microphone to you.
Hi, Beth. First of all, everyone, great job. Everything you guys touched on touches my company, which is Uber, so awesome. Beth, I had a question for you. You talked about path to conversion, and it's something that's super exciting to us. Wanted to know how you guys think about challenging that or tackling that, and if any of you other great speakers here have any other thoughts, we'd love to hear from you guys as well on path to conversion.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the last conversation we were having. So one of the other things, obviously we're looking at getting awareness, and then we're looking at turning that awareness into positive affinity, and ultimately to getting people to transact with us, to become loyal, to stay with us. And so we're looking at that kind of journey that people are on, and it's really about the various touch points. And we found some really good information that is aha type of thing. And the one thing that I would make a pitch for, if you aren't doing it here, but that we have really, really invested in, is human-centered design. So we're doing a lot of design thinking, and we are really so you let the data start to show you where to fish, and then you go in and you do just what David was saying, is you start to really understand the human, and you understand what's important to them, and you really get a sense of what are the things that you need to focus on in getting there, and then you design around them. And that has become a big effort of ours. We're still, we're like some companies. I mean, Apple's invented it long time ago, and Apple really doesn't do surveys. They are observational in how they conduct research. And so that is that human-centered design of saying, let's observe the human, let's understand what's important, let's find their pain points, some they may not even know about, and then let's go and solve them. Let's delight them with an experience that's better. So we're really taking that approach. We're letting the data kind of get us there to where we should be fishing, and then we're going really deep on the human side. You said you work for Uber? So one of the things that we didn't talk about is experimentation. And when you look at ROI for us in the company, we strongly believe about connected innovation or apex innovation. And Uber we partner with Uber, but for example, when Uber came to us and say, how do we actually pay the drivers? So we actually developed the technology to pay the drivers fast. Or if the Red Cross comes to us and said, how do we actually get people in Syria and all these refugees, give them money? Well, develop that kind of technology to provide that to the refugees. And so that whole thing about leveraging data or leveraging partnerships and defining ROI also as problem solving and the impact on society, that it's big for us as well.
Okay. One last question, I think.
That was an excellent session. Thank you. So I think we all know here that marketing has changed dramatically over the last several years, and digital marketing in particular is something that is very popular, particularly among the millennial population. So it may change for different brands and who you're trying to appeal to, but to what extent do you, and some things, by the way, are really hard to measure by way of ROI, to what extent, I'm just interested to know how much you put aside for just like test and learn things. Is there an appetite, or is it really hard to convince, whether it's the CEO or whoever it is, that, hey, we're going to take like $1 million, $2 million, and we're just going to do it towards these like new innovative tactics? I can't promise you that the Romy is going to be a 2, but I think we're going to learn a lot from it.
I'll start, and then Andres, you can take that. It's very interesting because while television, every year we come out with new television shows and stuff like that, it's very conservative, and people talk about A/B testing all the time. There's no way that I could get anybody in my company to say, let's do less marketing here and more marketing here to see what the impact's going to be. They just don't do it. So what we do is we just throw everything everywhere. So what we do, I mean, honestly, so I manage the budgets, the marketing budgets, so I hide innovation dollars. Yeah, that's it. And then when people come into my office and say, hey, you know, something like, for example, virtual reality, you know, there are a couple of us that think really towards the future, we have to develop a competency. So we fund it in little drips and drabs like that. But it's something that's really under the radar. And then when all of a sudden one of the executives says, hey, we should try this thing VR, and we say, boom, we're ready to go. But we do it, Skunk works under the radar of everything.
So when I mentioned before that one of the key things that I've done in the last year is put digital under communications. One of the most difficult exercises was moving the money and giving digital the ability to actually experiment and managing their money. So that was tremendously difficult, as you can imagine. And for 2018, actually, I would say that 5% of the budget is on experimentation, on marketing, and highly on digital. Digital. The way I look at digital is we need to move to an always-on approach. We need to switch the balance from linear to digital, but at the same time, if we do not experiment and we don't know what actually works and doesn't work, we are not going to get anywhere. So now the team, especially being closer to earned media, they have a way bigger or wider avenue to experiment and try to do new things, combined with a stronger relationship with the legal department, allowing them and trusting them on what they do. So we actually solved the whole issue about having to go to legal for every tweet and everything. Now we have a set of people, we trust them 100%, they can do it, and we are accountable for what they do.
Well, I do think it's really important to look at the digital the way you say that. I still think it's really important to look at linear television. But actually press your advertising agency people to get measurements as to how effective it is. Because what that'll help us be better at giving that information. Because we're trying to put that infrastructure in place so that we can help you understand how effective your on-screen linear advertising is.
Please give me a warm round of applause for just this phenomenal panel. Stephen, Andres, Beth, and David, and sharing their insights. That was really great.
Thank you for this afternoon's panel, and to Scott and the Videology team for making this keynote happen. We did go a couple minutes over, but the next sessions, all on this floor, do begin at 4:10. And lastly, I forgot to mention this earlier, if you do want to engage in our online conversation, use the hashtag MillenniumLive. Thank you again to the fantastic keynote.